Good morning, YouTube. It was requested that I do a brake job video. So today on this video, it's the 2014 Ford Escape. I'm going to show you guys some do's and don'ts of changing your front brakes and rear brakes. So the first thing we can see is that there are no screws holding this disc brake on, or the disc itself. If there were, I'd go ahead and take those off, whether they're an Allen key or a 6-point or just a regular Phillips head screwdriver. And basically this is an impact, and what it does is, as I put it in, it forces pressure downward by hitting on the edge of this. Right, I hit it with a sledge and it forces this thing to go in and turn. So it breaks it loose, right? I hit, it pushes in, and it turns. And that's just because there's a shelf inside here that makes it turn when it goes down. If I don't have one of these tools, no big deal. What I do is I take a screwdriver, right? And because I don't want to have to focus all my pressure and try and turn, right? I'm trying to do two things at once. What I do is I take a vice grip and I clamp it around here so I have leverage, and then I can simply turn it while applying as much pressure as possible without breaking this loose. But let's get into this brake job. What we have right here is a retaining clip. What this does is it holds the caliper in place and it pushes down on the caliper mounting bracket. So all we have to do is pry this off. Got the right tool. And that's as simple as that. Like I said, it just pulls on the mounting bracket and it pulls the caliper, holds it in place. Next thing we want to do is look at your caliper, right? If I look at this hose, on this one I can see that I can hinge this up, so I don't need to take out both these bolts. I'm going to break both of them loose, but on this one, again, I don't need to take them both out. People tend to do that. Trust me when I show you this, this is the easiest way to do it. It's just to hinge it up and then we replace the pads. Another thing I see people do is they take it all the way apart and then they put a caliper on this. So they take a standard adjustable caliper, right? And they try and put a board on it and rotate it in and squeeze the caliper down. What we're doing is we're making room for new brake pads. What I've never seen anybody do is do it while it's on here. This thing floats on here. It's already mounted in place. So if I want to press this down and make room for new brake pads, you do it right here. I loosen this all the way up. I put this around the housing. I put this here. I'll go ahead and show you. This is, again, just one way of doing it. I'm going to show you the other way, and I've been doing it for years. If you're replacing the rotors and the brakes at the same time, it's the best way to do it. I don't normally use a caliper. I only do it for stubborn pistons. So again, I come around the back, make sure I'm not pressing against anything in the back that's going to break. I screw this down here. Now before I do this, I need to go open the brake reservoir. And what we're allowing is we're allowing room for the brake fluid we're about to push back through the line. A lot of people, and this is not my vehicle, a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll run their brake pads all the way low, all the way around, and now they're low on fluid, so they top it off. So when we do this, we essentially put too much fluid in the reservoir and it overflows. So doing it this way, I can clamp it around and I tighten it here. As you can see, it's already sliding out, making room for that new brake pad. Here's proof it works, right? This is how much space we have for new brake pads right now. And if people are doing their required maintenance, there's not going to be anything wrong with this piston, right? It's been compressed several times. I can fit my whole finger in here now. I have room for new brake pads. That's the easiest way to do that. The other way to do it is, because there's a space in this rotor and there's a space in the back, I can come through the back, put it in the space, and pry this caliper forward nice and slow. You can do it with a regular screwdriver, right? And grab the edge of the rotor and pry it forward nice and slow, and that'll slide that out to me. So if I don't have an adjustable caliper, you don't need it, right? You can do it with a screwdriver in 90% of the cases. Alright, so now we need to loosen the caliper sliding pins at the back. There's two, there's one on top, one on bottom. If we're doing the brakes, we do not need to take off the mounting bracket. We just want to break this top one loose, because again, like I said, we're going to just hinge it up and make room for those new pads. Nice and simple. So symmetric 7 again. All I'm going to do is I'm going to break this top one loose. so it spins freely. That's all I need. Now I'm going to come to the bottom. And again, these have little caps on them on this one. They're just dust caps to keep the dust and corrosion out of that Allen so you don't have any issues. So again, I take this bottom one off. If your brake hose is not set up like this and you can't hinge it up, what I like to do is I like to take a bungee cord and secure this caliper up top while I change out these pads. Last thing I want to do is have it fall and put unneeded stress on this brake hose, and then I have to replace that too if it cracks. So we take these sliding pins all the way out, right? We're going to re-lube these up when we put them back in, and that's just to ensure that this thing slides as freely as possible back and forth as it should. Alright, so after trying to do it the easy way, right, hinging this up, it wouldn't free up. I had to get down and see why. It's because on this inside brake pad, what Ford did was they put clips on the inside that won't allow it to hinge up because there's not enough room here. So we're going to have to go ahead and take this top bolt loose, no big deal. Most of you guys won't. I mean, if you're working on an Escape and it's got these clips on the inside of the bracket, then obviously you will. But not all brackets have, not all brake pads have them. So just in this case, this is what we end up doing. And as you can see, we're looking at this. It's stuck on the inside. There's nothing we can do about that. It's just how this one's designed. So, like I said, normally though, if you had brake pads that stayed on there, you would leave this in and you would just simply hinge it up. So you would hinge it up to here. You take your brake pads out, right? I would take my brake pads off, put the new ones on, replace any clips if there's clips around here, metal clips, sliding bracket clips, sliding brake pad clips, right? So I would replace those if I had them, and then slap this back down, tighten them back down to 25 foot-pounds or so. It changes from vehicle to vehicle. Alright, so here's our new brake pads. Alright, this one just sets on the outside, no big deal. And then we have the one on the inside that has this clip on here that slides into the piston itself, right? So we're going to clip this back in. And that's it. So we'll put this back down, right? We made all that space, pretty easy. As you can see, it needs a little pressure, so that's what that, it comes with a new retaining clip that'll help pull it down in place. Before we put this back together, we want to go ahead and lube these bolts up. You can take a wire brush, clean these up as much as possible. This one's pretty dirty. I'll go ahead and do that for her, it's no big deal. So let me grab a wire brush. What I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this up. I'm going to use this lube it up, slide it back in, tighten it down to 25 foot-pounds, put the wheel back on, and we're going to take that wheel to 100 foot-pounds. Alright, so I went ahead and filed this down. If you guys have sandpaper, sandpaper's fine. You just want to clean it down so it's nice and smooth again. I just filed it down because it was quicker and just to make it get rid of that high buildup of corrosion we had on the end of these. So I lubed the bottom closer to the thread, and the reason for that is once I slide it through this, it's going to slide up anyway. We're just trying to add a little bit of lubricant, get them both in place. And as you can see, 25 foot-pounds even. $24.7. It's good enough. So as I said, we finished this up with New retaining clips. You simply hook in here like they did before, so we're going to start this hook here. Just put them in there so that way they're in place, and we're going to pull it around. Push it in, make sure it's seated all the way. We can tap it in. And that's it. Remember that when you're doing this, if you find it hard to do, remember you can bend down on the outside edge, right? So I can bow it up just like that to help slide it around. And it's as easy as that. This brake is done. We'll put the wheel on. When I took this apart, I lifted the vehicle only up just enough to get the tire off the ground. This helps when putting the tire back on, so I don't have to lift it all the way in the air. Before I start these, I'm going to make sure it's flat against the rotor itself and get these started. I don't just impact these on. The reason for that is that's a good way to strip these out. I want to make sure it's started at least 3-4 turns. If I can do it all the way, that's fine. And I'm not going to torque them on with my impact. My impact's set to about 80 foot-pounds right now, so it'll tighten them all to 80 foot-pounds. And then I'll go back through with the torque wrench and ensure it's right. Do a star pad. And then I go to the other side and do the same thing. So I lift it up just enough, right? The back wheels are chocked. We're on jack stands, we're not just on jacks. And again, that's the easiest way to do this. Alright, so I was doing the rear brake pads. They should be done exactly the same as the front. But I did have an issue taking these off as far as the caliper, collapsing that caliper, right? I did it normally like I do it around the edges, and sometimes you end up with a stuck one. Rather than torquing on this too hard, right? I don't want to break my caliper or warp it or anything like that, right? So sometimes you do have to do this. On this piston in the rear, as you can see, there's a solid face on it. If there's not, you don't want to press on the thinnest metal, right? So you do want to put a protective plate on this. You can use a piece of wood, whatever you're using, but sometimes you end up with a stubborn one, and that's what we have here. So what I wanted to show you was how this works. Is there's an O-ring around this piston that slides in the caliper. Sometimes dirt and everything, or they get seated in here. This gets dry rotted or corroded. The piston O-ring itself on the inside. Sometimes the twisting motion, so as we're doing this, a twisting motion, this will turn with the screw. That little bit of twisting motion can help that O-ring slide in. As you see it turning with my caliper. And if we have to use an extension on this, right, I just take a wrench, the end of a wrench, right, put it on the end of my caliper to make this handle longer and make it easier on me. So, but as we're doing this, that piston turns and helps collapse. Again, what we want to make sure is that we have control of this and we're not tweaking on that brake line. So we want to go nice and slow. And this one is stubborn. But as it gets further in there, it'll get easier and easier. Just take your time. There you go. Make sure we're bottomed out. It looks like we are, and we are. Alright, and that's it. Now we're going to go ahead and replace these brake pads in the rear. Again, we're going to lube these sliding pins. I have to clean these also because there is a little corrosion on it. No big deal. It has the same spring retaining clips in the back. And make sure, I did it, I didn't mention it, make sure you put these dust caps back on in the front. Alright guys, that's all I got for you in this video. Make sure you put that reservoir cap back on, and at the end of the job, before you put this thing in gear, crank it up and pump those brakes a couple times. All you're doing is closing up that gap between the caliper and the brake pad itself. And take it for a test spin, and again, make sure you go through and check those lug nuts one last time. So I tighten everything to 100. I drive it around, make sure everything's good, and I go through and check 2 or 3 and make sure they're all 100 on each tire. And again, good luck. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask them, and I'm here to help. I'll answer your questions as quickly as possible, usually in a couple hours. And again, this is for a Ford Escape, but brake jobs in general are all the same. And if you guys have questions for a different job you're doing, feel free to ask, and I'll help you out.